Nobody was supposed to see that car. Black paint, quiet engine parked wrong for the neighborhood. Too clean, too patient. Sitting in an alley where men didn't wait unless they were waiting for blood. That was the problem. Harlem notices things like that. And when people noticed where it was parked behind Bumpy's spot, the whispers didn't sound like gossip anymore. They sounded like panic, because there are rules in this city. Written ones, unwritten ones, and then there are the ones that don't bend. Bumpy Johnson didn't bend. Not to cops. Not to Italians, not to men who thought their skin made them brave. Everybody in Harlem knew that. Everybody lived safer because of it. So when the word started moving real quiet at first, nobody believed it. They said Bumpy was talking to them. Not the mob, not politicians, them. The kind of men who don't walk into Harlem by accident. The kind of men whose presence means somebody already decided somebody else doesn't deserve to live. People laughed at first, nervous laughs. The kind you give a bad joke because the alternative is fear. Then details started showing up. A white man, trench coat, standing too comfortable near Lennox. A scar you don't forget once you've seen it. A handshake that lasted a second longer than it should have. And the laughter stopped, because Harlem had seen enemies before, but this was different. This was like watching your shield shake hands with the blade. Bumpy didn't explain, he never did. That's what scared them most. He still walked the block like nothing changed. Same pace, same calm. Same eyes that looked past you instead of at you like he was already watching tomorrow. But power doesn't move without reason. And Bumpy Johnson never made a move unless the board was already mapped. What nobody knew yet was this: the danger wasn't coming from the alley. It was coming fast, organized, and aimed straight at the heart of Harlem. And Bumpy had already seen it. He'd heard things before the streets did. Quiet things. The kind that don't travel through mouths, only through fear. Something big was planned. Not noise, not intimidation, erasure. A strike meant to send a message so loud it wouldn't need words afterward. The police weren't going to stop it. Some of them wouldn't want to. The politicians wouldn't touch it. Too messy. Which left Bumpy alone. Again. And when Bumpy Johnson is alone, it's because he's choosing between bad options and worse ones. That black sedan wasn't a betrayal. It was a gamble. A dangerous one. Because to stop what was coming, Bumpy needed information that only lived inside the enemy's mouth. And there was only one man alive who hated him enough and respected him enough to open that mouth. A man Bumpy hadn't seen since a place where nobody wins and everybody remembers. A place that teaches you who you really are. And who you're willing to make deals with just to survive. That story didn't start in Harlem. It started behind concrete walls and it ended with blood. Prison teaches you one thing fast. Everybody's lying. The walls lie. The guards lie. The gangs lie. Even the silence lies, especially the silence. That's where Bumpy met him. Not in a yard, not face to face, not with introductions. It happened the way real meetings happen, sudden, ugly, and already violent. Steam in the laundry room, machines screaming. No witnesses that mattered. 3 white boys moved wrong. Too confident, too sure of the numbers. They thought fear worked the same everywhere. Bumpy corrected them. He didn't rush. Didn't waste motion. He broke one knee, then another, like checking boxes. By the time the steam cleared, 2 men were done thinking for the rest of their lives. That left the third. Young. Mean. Eyes burning with something louder than hatred. This one didn't back up. He leaned in. That was Elias. He had a blade, handmade, ugly. The kind meant for one use. He wanted martyrdom. Wanted a story carved into his death. Bumpy pinned him instead, pipe hot against his back, knife close enough to feel the promise. Elias spit. Said things you don't repeat, things meant to force a killing. Bumpy didn't blink. He saw what others miss, always had. Behind the hate was discipline. Behind the poison was loyalty, twisted, yes, but unshakable. Bumpy respected commitment, even when it disgusted him. So he did the one thing Elias wasn't prepared for. He stepped back. Let him breathe. Let him live. That kind of mercy doesn't feel like kindness. It feels like dominance. Like being told your life isn't worth the effort. Elias never forgot that. They didn't become friends, don't mistake it. They didn't talk, didn't sit together. Didn't acknowledge each other unless the situation demanded it. But prison notices patterns. When knives came out during a riot, Elias wasn't touched. When paperwork disappeared in the warden's office, Bumpy's name wasn't on it. No words, no thanks, just a quiet understanding between two men who knew what the other was capable of. Survival isn't loyalty, it's alignment. Years passed, bars opened, streets changed. Bumpy walked back into Harlem and claimed it like destiny owed him rent. Elias walked into something darker. Groups that hid behind sheets and speeches. Men who used hate like a uniform and money like oxygen. He rose fast, not because he was loud, because he was useful. He moved things, guns, explosives, information. The kind of logistics that don't make headlines until bodies do. Which is how Bumpy knew the threat was real. Not a rumor, not kids playing soldier. This was organized, funded, close. And when a plan gets that far, it means someone already decided who's expendable. That's when Bumpy made the call no king should ever have to make. He reached into the past, pulled out a debt nobody thought still existed, and set a meeting that if it went wrong wouldn't just kill him. It would prove Harlem was never safe to begin with. They didn't meet in a place that mattered. That's how Bumpy did dangerous business. An alley that smelled like grease and old rain. A spot nobody would remember unless something went wrong. Something always does. Elias stepped out first, older now, heavier in the shoulders, eyes colder like they'd learned not to react anymore. He didn't look around much. Men who expect trouble don't waste time scanning for it. Bumpy didn't move to greet him. That told Elias everything. 2 bodyguards behind Bumpy, close enough to die for him, far enough to let him speak alone. Elias smiled without humor. You brought an audience. Bumpy lit a cigarette, took his time. You brought history. That landed. They stood there, 2 men who should have never shared air again, bound by something neither liked to name. Not respect, not trust, memory. Elias talked first. Not because he wanted to, because he needed to control the pace. There's noise, he said. Kids trying to prove something, they don't listen. Bumpy exhaled smoke. They never do, that's why they die. Silence stretched, the kind that tests nerve. Elias finally said it. Not the plan, not the target, the word Sunday. Bumpy felt it settle in his chest, not fear, calculation. Sunday means families. Sunday means doors unlocked. Sunday means nobody expects violence. That's bad business, Bumpy said calmly. Elias laughed once, sharp. You didn't call me to lecture. No, Bumpy said. I called you because this ends one of 2 ways, quiet or unforgettable. Elias stiffened. He knew that tone, had heard it once before behind concrete walls. You think I can stop it? Elias asked. Orders came down, people already loaded trucks. I don't need you to stop it, Bumpy replied. I need you to open a door. Elias shook his head. You walk through that door, you don't walk back. Bumpy stepped closer, just enough. I've walked into worse with less, he said. Question is, are you opening it for me, or am I kicking it down and taking your world with it? That's when Elias understood. This wasn't a favor, it was leverage. If Elias said no, Harlem burned, and so did everything he'd built. If he said yes, he betrayed men who didn't forgive. Either way, someone would bleed. Elias swallowed. Midnight, he said. Queens, by the water. Bumpy nodded once. No guns. You won't need one, Elias replied. You'll need luck. Bumpy turned to leave. Behind him, Elias spoke softly. This doesn't make us even. Bumpy didn't look back. Nothing ever does. As the alley emptied, the city kept breathing. Cars passed. Music played somewhere too loud. Families planned their Sundays. And one king prepared to walk unarmed into a room full of men who would kill him just to say they did. Because Bumpy Johnson didn't stop storms by hiding. He walked straight into the center. Midnight doesn't announce itself. It just shows up when you're already committed. The car ride was quiet. Too quiet. Tires humming. Streetlights sliding across the glass like slow blinks. The driver kept checking the mirror like fear might sneak up from behind. Bumpy didn't tell him to stop. Queens looked different at night. Fewer eyes, longer shadows. The kind of place where mistakes don't echo, they disappear. The warehouse sat by the water like it was waiting. No lights, no guards in sight. That was the first warning. Bumpy stepped out alone. No gun, no backup. Just a suit pressed sharp enough to look deliberate. He walked the long way around, counting exits that didn't exist. The air smelled like fuel and damp wood. Inside, voices leaked through the walls, excited ones, angry ones, men rehearsing courage because they'd need it soon. Bumpy slipped through the side door Elias promised would be open. It was, second warning. He moved slow, not cautious. Intentional, every step placed like it mattered. Then he saw it. Crates stacked careless. Too many, stamped wrong. Not cargo meant to last. This wasn't intimidation. This was demolition. Men gathered around a table. Maps spread. Fingers stabbing at streets Bumpy knew by heart. Names spoken by mouths that didn't belong saying them. And at the head of it all, Elias, louder now, commanding. Playing king to men who didn't know they were already dead. Bumpy stayed in the dark, watching, waiting. That's when the door behind him slammed shut. Metal on metal, final. 12 guns came up at once. Someone shouted. Light flooded the room, and Elias turned, smiling. Not the smile from the alley. This one was sharp, finished. Gentlemen, Elias said evenly, pointing straight into the shadows. We've been honored. Bumpy stepped forward, hands raised, calm as ever. He had walked into the trap, and for the first time in a long time, the board looked empty of exits. Nobody breathed. That's the moment that tells you everything, when even the killers are waiting to see who moves first. Elias walked slow, confident, revolver heavy in his hand. The kind of walk you take when you think the story already belongs to you. You always did like the dramatic entrance, he said. Bumpy watched his eyes, not the gun. Guns lie, eyes don't. I came for information, Bumpy replied, not applause. A few of the men laughed, nervous, hungry. They knew his name. That made him valuable, dead or alive. Elias pressed the barrel to Bumpy's forehead. Cold, solid, certain. You thought prison meant something, Elias said. Thought mercy bought loyalty. Bumpy didn't flinch. I thought you understood math. That confused him, just for half a second, enough. Elias cocked the hammer. Any last words? Bumpy held his gaze. That's when he saw it. Not in Elias' face, in his hand. The one turned away from the others, fingers moving, subtle, old language. A signal you only learn when survival is shared. Bumpy dropped. The shot roared. A body behind him collapsed, choking on surprise, then hell broke loose. Elias spun, firing with precision, not wild, targeted. Men at the table fell first. The loud ones, the ambitious ones. This wasn't an execution, it was a cleanup. Bumpy rolled under the table as wood splintered above him. Shouts, screams, confusion turning into betrayal. He understood the play instantly. He wasn't the partner. He was the distraction, used to gather every threat in one room. That didn't make him powerless, it made him angry. A pistol slid across the floor. Bumpy grabbed it and moved, not to help Elias, to survive. Someone knocked over a lantern. Fire crawled fast. The crates started to sweat. Time got loud. Elias shouted something Bumpy didn't hear. Smoke ate the air. Men ran into each other. Shots echoed wrong. And then Bumpy saw it. 2 rifles pinning Elias down, empty revolver, no cover. For the second time in their lives, Elias' fate sat in Bumpy's hands. Bumpy hesitated, just long enough to decide what kind of king he was. Bumpy fired 2 clean shots, no waste. The men pinning Elias dropped like their strings got cut. One didn't even understand he was dying. Elias looked up, shocked. Not grateful, surprised. That was enough. Fire climbed the walls now, greedy, licking at the crates like it recognized what they were. Heat pressed in. Smoke made the room shrink. The back's blocked, Elias shouted. Truck parked tight. Bumpy scanned fast, front doors wide, exposed. Lane, he said. Only lane, Elias answered. They moved together without agreement. Old instinct, prison instinct. When chaos hits, you don't debate, you flow. A hanging bulb swayed above them. Bumpy raised the pistol and shot it out. Darkness swallowed the room. Now it was his world, footsteps, breathing, panic. Bumpy didn't chase noise. He waited for fear to come to him. A shape lunged. He sidestepped, drove the man into steel. Bone cracked. No shot fired. Another rushed. Too fast, too loud. Bumpy used his weight, redirected momentum, let gravity finish the argument. Somewhere nearby, Elias grunted. A body hit the floor. The fire found the crates. The ticking wasn't mechanical, it was inevitable. They burst through the front doors together, wood exploding. Night air slamming into lungs that forgot how to breathe. They hit the dock hard, rolled, laughed once, both of them the kind of laugh that only shows up when you almost die. Then the warehouse screamed. The explosion wasn't loud at first, it was heavy, like the ground got punched. Windows shattered, heat chased them down the pier. Bumpy stood, brushing ash off his sleeves, calm returning like it always did. Elias leaned against a piling, bleeding, smiling wrong. "I cleaned my house," Elias said. "You used mine to do it," Bumpy replied. Sirens started crying in the distance. Elias looked at the road, then at Bumpy. "You going to finish it?" Bumpy shook his head. "You still have value." That hurt Elias more than a bullet. Headlights cut through the smoke. Bumpy's car. And the next move would decide who owned who. The car skidded in sideways, doors flew open. Shotgun came up. Bumpy raised a hand, sharp, final, "Stand down." The driver froze, eyes darting between the burning warehouse and the bleeding man beside his boss. Confusion is dangerous. Bumpy killed it fast. "He rides," Bumpy said. Elias didn't argue. Pride burns off quick when sirens get closer. They slid into the back seat together. Smoke clung to them. The car pulled away slow, like nothing unusual just happened. Inside, no one spoke. That silence weighed more than the explosion. Streetlights passed. Each one a reminder that both men were still alive, and neither of them liked why. Elias finally broke. "You saved me again." Bumpy didn't look at him. "I saved an asset." Elias laughed, then stopped. He understood what that meant. "You hold the story," Elias said. "Those men die, I live. You talk, I disappear." Bumpy nodded once. "Exactly." Elias stared out the window. The city reflected back at him, fractured. "What's the price?" "Harlem," Bumpy said. "You don't touch it, not with speeches, not with matches, not with trucks. Anything moving through my streets passes clean, no stops." Elias clenched his jaw. "And if I forget?" Bumpy's voice stayed level. "I remind people how you cleaned your house." That landed heavy. The car slowed. Neutral ground. Elias opened the door but hesitated. "This ends someday," he said. "You know that." Bumpy met his eyes. "Everything does." Elias stepped into the night and vanished into his world. The car pulled off. Behind them, Harlem slept. Safe, for now, but power like that doesn't dissolve, it waits. Time didn't heal anything, it just hid the scars better. For a while it worked. Quiet years, no marches cutting through Harlem, no fires licking at church doors. Trucks rolled through without stopping like they'd been warned by the pavement itself. People noticed. They didn't know why the storm kept missing them, but they felt it. Harlem learned to sleep again. Bumpy never explained. Kings don't justify peace. But power shifts, it always does. Elias started slipping, drinking more, talking too loud in rooms he shouldn't have trusted. Old men grow careless when they think they've beaten the future. And when men like that talk, rumors move faster than bullets. Word reached Bumpy the same way it always did, indirectly but precise. The leash was stretching. Elias was testing memory, testing fear, testing whether the story still held weight. That's when Bumpy decided not to warn him. Warnings invite negotiation, endings don't. Elias was found in a room that smelled like cheap soap and regret. No marks, no signs of struggle, just quiet, final. On the table beside him sat something small, black, a night, no message, no signature. Bumpy never spoke his name again. He didn't have to, because after that nobody asked why Harlem stayed untouched. They just accepted it like weather you don't question. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers once. And the world adjusts. Bumpy never told the story, not to his men, not to the neighborhood. Not even to himself in the quiet moments when sleep wouldn't come. That's how you know it mattered, because the truth wasn't heroic. It wasn't clean. It didn't make him feel righteous. It made him feel responsible. People like to believe power comes from standing tall and saying the right things. Bumpy knew better. Power comes from knowing when to step into filth so others don't have to. He didn't beat hate by shouting at it. He cornered it, learned how it moved, what it valued, what it feared. Then he wrapped a leash around its throat and held on until it stopped pulling. That's not justice. That's control. Harlem stayed quiet not because evil vanished, but because it learned the cost of entering without permission. The streets never put up statues for that kind of protection. No parades. No speeches, just families walking to church unaware of how close fire came to their doors. That was enough for Bumpy. Some men fight to be remembered. Bumpy fought so nobody would ever need to remember, and somewhere deep in the underworld that lesson stuck. Because even monsters understand hierarchy, and they know when a king is watching. Harlem didn't thank Bumpy. That's the first thing people get wrong. Safety never sends flowers. Peace doesn't shake your hand. It just shows up quietly and lets you live like nothing almost happened. But Bumpy felt the weight anyway. Because when you pull a city back from the edge remembers your name. After Elias died, things shifted. Not loudly, not all at once. Small changes, subtle ones. The kind only a man like Bumpy noticed. Strangers started asking the wrong questions. Too curious, too polite. A truck that should have kept moving slowed down on 116th just for a breath too long. A face from Jersey showed up twice in the same week. Power doesn't disappear when you remove one man, it looks for a new spine. Bumpy sat in his office one night, lights low, chessboard untouched. He wasn't playing. He was thinking about who would try to fill the vacuum, because someone always does. And whoever stepped into Elias' shadow wouldn't come with respect. They'd come with revenge. Not for ideology, for humiliation. That was the real sin. Elias hadn't just died. He'd been exposed even if nobody could prove it. Men like that don't forgive being owned, even in death. Bumpy knew what came next. Testing. Small fires before the big one. It started with a boy, 18, wrong neighborhood, right timing. They found him shaking down a numbers runner 2 blocks from Lenox. White kid, nervous, carrying a pistol he didn't know how to love yet. Bumpy had him brought in, no fists, no shouting, just a chair and a glass of water. Who sent you? Bumpy asked. The kid tried to lie. Voice cracked halfway through. Bumpy waited. Silence does more damage than threats. Finally, the truth spilled out. A name Bumpy hadn't heard before, but the structure was familiar. Same roots. Same money, same hate, just younger and louder copycats. Men who didn't understand the leash, only that it used to exist. Bumpy let the boy go. That confused everyone. He's a message, Bumpy said, not the sender. And messages only matter if they're delivered intact. 3 nights later, that intact message was found beaten half to death in Jersey, dumped where his people could see him. No explanation, just fear. The test failed. That's when Bumpy realized something colder. The danger wasn't another Elias. It was ambition without memory. These new men didn't know prison codes, didn't respect debts, didn't believe in balance. They believed in spectacle, and spectacle needs blood. Bumpy started moving pieces quietly. Roots closed, allies warned, old favors collected like interest. He didn't wait for an attack, he created pressure. Suddenly, trucks got stopped in places they shouldn't, accounts froze, meetings leaked to the wrong ears. No fingerprints, no signatures, just friction. The kind that makes organizations eat themselves. But even then, Bumpy knew this wasn't over, because hate doesn't stop trying, it just gets smarter. One night, Johnny asked the question nobody else dared. Boss, what if next time they don't want leverage? Bumpy looked out the window, street calm, too calm. The next time, he said, I don't negotiate. That wasn't a threat, it was a forecast, because Bumpy Johnson didn't believe in endless mercy, only calculated restraint. And restraint runs out when the cost gets too high. Retaliation never announces itself with sirens. It starts with inconvenience, a delivery that does arrive, a meeting that falls apart because the room feels wrong. Men waking up with the sense they're being watched, because they are. Bumpy made it systematic. He didn't strike the head, he tightened the spine. Roots that once flowed smooth started choking. Drivers vanished for hours, then returned shaken, saying nothing but refusing to drive again. Money stopped reaching the hands it was promised to. Someone was bleeding the operation without spilling blood. That scares men more than funerals. The new leadership panicked. You could smell it in how sloppy they got. Loud meetings, bad choices, talking too much in places where walls remembered everything. And that's when the wrong man volunteered to fix it. His name didn't matter. What mattered was what he wanted. He wanted to be the one who broke Harlem, not for ideology, not for money, for reputation. He was young enough to think fear was permanent, smart enough to be dangerous, stupid enough to believe Bumpy Johnson was a story that had already ended. He sent a message, not a bombing, not yet, a fire, small, controlled. A storefront on the edge of Harlem late at night, no bodies, just smoke and warning. The street reacted instantly. Old men got quiet. Women pulled children inside faster. Everybody looked toward Bumpy's block, waiting. Bumpy didn't rush. That worried his enemies more than action would have. Because when Bumpy went silent, it meant he was deciding how much of you was going to survive. The second message never came, because Bumpy intercepted the man before he could send it. No shootout, no spectacle, a quiet pickup, a quiet ride. They sat across from each other in a bare room, nothing between them but air and consequences. "You think this is about hate," Bumpy said calmly. "It's not." The man smiled. "It's about power." Bumpy nodded. "That's where you're wrong. Power doesn't need to prove itself." The man leaned forward. "Then why am I here?" Bumpy's eyes hardened just a fraction. "Because you confused attention with control." That was the last lesson he needed. What happened next never traveled as a story, only as an absence. The fire stopped. The questions stopped. The testing stopped. Years later, people would argue about why Harlem stayed untouched when other neighborhoods burned. Some said luck. Some said politics. Some said myth. Bumpy never corrected them, because the truth was heavier than any explanation. He had shown his enemies that there were worse things than dying for your beliefs. There was living with the knowledge that you were allowed to exist only because someone stronger found you useful or tolerable. And tolerance in Bumpy's world could be revoked. Any night, without warning. Bumpy grew older, slower in the body, sharper in the mind. He watched new players rise, new flags wave. New hatreds dressed themselves in new language. He didn't chase them all, only the ones that drifted too close. That was his real legacy, not violence, boundary. A line drawn so deep into the street that even monsters learned to step around it. And long after Bumpy Johnson was gone, that line was still there, unseen, unmarked, but respected, because some power doesn't fade. It teaches the world how to behave. And waits. The mistake always comes from distance. Men far enough away from Harlem start believing stories decay with time. That fear has an expiration date. That power retires when the man does. That's who he was. Came up from down south, money clean on paper, dirty in motion. He didn't wear hoods or symbols, didn't shout slogans. He wore suits and spoke softly, said things like investment and real estate. He thought that made him different. He bought 3 buildings on the edge of Harlem in 6 months. Cash, no questions. The kind of buying that doesn't ask permission, only forgiveness later. Bumpy heard about him before the ink dried, because when money moves wrong, the street feels it. This man wasn't testing boundaries by accident. He was erasing them. The first meeting was polite, too polite. They sat across from each other in a room that had seen better men sweat. The newcomer smiled a lot, used Bumpy's name like it was a legend, not a presence. "I respect what you built," the man said, "but times change." Bumpy stirred his drink slowly. "Times don't change," he said. "People forget." The man laughed, thought it was wisdom, thought it was nostalgia. That's when Bumpy knew he wouldn't listen. Men like that only hear consequence. The buildings didn't last, not burned, not vandalized. That would have been simple. Instead, inspectors arrived. Banks froze funds. Tenants vanished overnight like they'd been warned by the walls themselves. Contracts fell apart because signatures suddenly mattered. Partners backed out because phones rang with no voices on the other end. The man fought back, filed complaints, made calls, pushed, and every push cost him more. He didn't know who was hitting him, that was the point. Desperate men make loud mistakes. He sent someone to scare a shop owner, just a shove, just a threat. The boy came back missing teeth and carrying a message he wouldn't repeat. After that, the man demanded a sit-down. This time, his smile was gone. "You're strangling my business," he said. Bumpy leaned back, calm. "No," he replied. "I'm showing you how it feels to be unnecessary." The man stood up too fast. That was his last miscalculation. They didn't kill him, they let him leave. But leaving isn't always escape. He sold everything at a loss, took his money elsewhere, told people Harlem was cursed, untouchable, not worth it. That story traveled farther than violence ever could. And Harlem stayed Harlem. Years passed. New faces, new music, new problems, but some rules survive generations. Don't test the street. Don't confuse silence for weakness. Don't assume the past is finished just because it's quiet. Bumpy aged into myth without trying. He didn't need monuments, he left systems. On certain nights, old men still talked low in barbershops. Not about heroics, about warnings. They said Harlem was protected by something invisible, something patient. They never said Bumpy's name out loud. Names carry weight, and weight attracts attention. The city changed its clothes, but not its habits. New storefronts, new music bleeding out of basements, new faces pretending they invented ambition. Harlem learned how to look harmless without ever being weak. That illusion drew predators. One of them came wearing a badge, not NYPD, federal, clean suit, clean hands, smile that didn't belong anywhere near Lenox. He didn't raid, didn't arrest, he asked questions, quiet ones, who owned what, who protected who, why certain streets never burned when others did. Bumpy noticed him immediately. Men like that don't hunt criminals, they hunt structures. The agent approached Bumpy indirectly, always indirectly, first through a banker, then a councilman, then a mutual friend who wasn't mutual anymore after the meeting. He just wants to talk, they said. Bumpy smiled when he heard that. Talking is how wars start. The meeting happened in daylight, public place. Too many eyes for violence. The agent spoke carefully. You've kept things stable. Bumpy sipped his coffee. Stability scares people like you. The agent leaned in. What scares me is not knowing why. Bumpy set the cup down. Then you're already in danger. That ended the conversation. It also started something else. Pressure came fast after that. Licenses delayed, permits denied. Friendly businesses audited without warning, not punishment, probing. They were looking for cracks. Bumpy responded by giving them nothing. No reaction, no retaliation, just stillness. Stillness is unbearable to men who need results. The agent pushed harder. That's when he crossed a line he didn't see. A young runner got picked up. Nothing major. Loitering. Possession. Paper charges. But the holding room he ended up in wasn't random. Someone wanted him scared. Someone wanted him to talk. The boy didn't, not because he was brave, because he knew something worse than prison existed. When he got out shaken but intact, Bumpy knew the agent was done. You don't touch the roots unless you want the tree to fall on you. The agent disappeared from Harlem, transferred, promoted, buried in paperwork somewhere quieter. Official story said success. Unofficial truth said stalemate. Bumpy didn't celebrate. He understood something most men never do. The law doesn't forgive humiliation, it waits. As the years stacked up, Bumpy's circle thinned, not from betrayal, from time. Men retired, men slowed, men died in beds instead of streets. That's a victory nobody applauds. New leaders rose under him, smarter, less flashy. Watching more than talking, he taught them one rule above all others. Never enjoy power, use it. Because enjoyment makes you sloppy. One winter night, Harlem went dark, not metaphorically. Power outage, whole blocks, no lights, no phones, no noise, the kind of darkness criminals love, and fear rushed in to fill the gap. Bumpy stood at his window, coat on, listening. No sirens, no screams, just quiet. That's when he knew the lesson had stuck. Even in the dark, nobody moved. That's how you measure control, not by what happens when you're watching, but by what doesn't happen when you're not. Bumpy turned away from the window. Another night survived. Another line untested. But lines don't erase desire. They only delay it. And somewhere, someone was already deciding to try again. Desire doesn't knock, it circles. The man deciding to try again wasn't loud, wasn't young, wasn't angry. That's what made him dangerous. He came from money that didn't sweat. Old money that believed cities were assets, not communities. He didn't hate Harlem. Hate is emotional. He was indifferent. Indifference kills slower, but it kills cleaner. He didn't send muscle, didn't send threats. He sent paperwork. Deeds changed hands quietly. Taxes got reevaluated. Rents climbed in places that hadn't changed in 50 years. People felt it before they understood it. Bumpy felt it immediately because violence announces itself. This didn't. Johnny brought the file in without speaking. That told Bumpy everything. He flipped through it slowly. Names, shell companies, boards that met in rooms Harlem would never see. "This one's different," Johnny said finally. Bumpy nodded. "That's why he thinks he's safe." Different men make the same mistake. They assume respect only comes from fear. Bumpy knew better. Respect comes from consequence, and consequences don't always look like punishment. The first move wasn't against the man, it was against his confidence. Banks started asking questions they'd never asked before. Investors hesitated. Lawyers advised caution without explaining why. Nothing illegal, just uncomfortable. The man noticed. He didn't panic, he adjusted. That's when Bumpy smiled. Adjustment means acknowledgement. Acknowledgement means you're already reacting. The man requested a meeting, not a sit-down, a lunch, public, neutral, civilized. Bumpy agreed. That worried everyone, because Bumpy only met men like that when he wanted them to hear something they couldn't unhear. The man spoke first, polite, measured. "You protect the past," he said. "I'm building the future." Bumpy cut his food carefully. The future doesn't last if it disrespects the ground it stands on. The man chuckled. "Ground doesn't feel." Bumpy looked at him. "People do." That ended the lunch. The next month hurt. The man lost more than money. He lost momentum. Projects stalled. Permits expired. Partners vanished into silence. No threats, no warnings, just erosion. He tried pushing back harder. That's when Bumpy made the final adjustment. A single document surfaced. Nothing dramatic, nothing criminal, just truth. Connections the man thought were buried. Deals he assumed time had forgiven. The document didn't go public. It didn't need to. It went exactly where it would hurt the most. The man called Bumpy that night. No pleasantries. "I want out," he said. Bumpy's voice stayed even. "You were never in." The man sold at a loss, left quietly. Told people Harlem was complicated. That word spread. Complicated scares money more than violence ever could. Harlem stayed. Bumpy sat alone later, chessboard finally touched. He moved the knight, same piece, same square. Some habits don't change because they don't need to. Power isn't loud, it's patient. And patience always wins. Until someone forgets why it existed in the first place. For a while, nobody forgot. That's the quiet season, the dangerous one. When men stop making noise because they're watching instead of acting. Bumpy felt it in the air. Harlem was breathing steady, but somewhere beyond it, people were studying the pattern, trying to find the hole. There's always someone who thinks patience is weakness. He came wearing charity, a foundation, scholarships, clinics. His name on banners like a blessing. Cameras loved him. Politicians shook his hand. He spoke about uplift. That word made Bumpy uneasy. Because men who advertise virtue usually need something covered. The charity didn't help Harlem, it bought it. Loans tied to favors, jobs tied to loyalty, gratitude tied to silence. People didn't notice at first. They were too busy surviving. Bumpy noticed immediately. This wasn't conquest, it was replacement. You don't burn a neighborhood when you plan to own it. Bumpy didn't confront him. That would legitimize him. Instead, Bumpy watched the flow, money in, influence out. He mapped it all, where the leverage lived, who owed who smiled too wide when the man spoke. This took time. Time was something Bumpy always invested. The charity man finally requested a meeting, different from the others. This one believed his own story. "I want to work with you," he said, "together." Bumpy asked one question. "Who do you answer to?" The man hesitated. That told Bumpy everything. The unraveling didn't look like revenge, it looked like truth. A contract exposed here, a donor questioned there, a grant paused for review. The charity man fought it publicly, smiled through interviews. Promised transparency. Privately, he panicked, because benevolence collapses the moment it's audited. The final meeting was short. The charity man didn't sit, he paced. "They're tearing everything apart," he said. "You did this." Bumpy stood slowly. "No," he replied, "you built it wrong." The man stopped pacing. "I was helping." Bumpy's voice dropped. "You were replacing." Silence filled the room. That kind of silence ends careers. The charity folded, buildings reverted, debts dissolved, names removed from banners. The man left the city bitter. Harlem remained, not grateful, intact. Bumpy didn't celebrate, he rarely did, because each victory taught the same lesson: threats evolve, so must the response. He knew the day would come when someone wouldn't test the line, they'd erase it. And that day would demand something louder. That night, Bumpy locked his office and walked the block alone. Old habit, he nodded to shopkeepers. Children ran past him, laughing, unaware of the storms that had already missed them. That was the point. Protection isn't about being seen, it's about never needing to be. The louder day came without warning. No build-up, no signal. Just a single gunshot 2 blocks off Lenox, fired too clean to be random. One man down, not dead. Shot to remind, not remove. That was new, that was deliberate. Bumpy heard about it before the echo finished fading. He didn't ask who fired the shot, he asked who benefited. The victim was chosen carefully, well-liked, neutral, a man who kept his head down and his mouth shut. Not Bumpy's inner circle, but close enough that the message was clear. We can reach inside, that's what the bullet said. Bumpy sat with the man later that night. Hospital room quiet, machine steady. "You didn't see his face?" Bumpy asked. The man shook his head. "Didn't need to." That answer bothered Bumpy, because faceless threats mean ideology. Ideology doesn't negotiate. The second sign came the next morning. A pamphlet, not political, not racial, economic, talked about renewal, order, reclaiming space. That's when Bumpy understood this wasn't hate, it was entitlement. Men who believed ownership was destiny. The group stayed invisible. No leaders, no meetings, just cells, financed clean, armed smart. They didn't want Harlem afraid. They wanted it compliant. That was more dangerous. Fear fights back. Compliance rots quietly. Bumpy changed tactics. No warnings, no negotiations, no public moves. He went subterranean, old favors in old cities. Men nobody remembered but everyone still owed. Information started flowing in fragments, enough to see the shape, not enough to touch it, yet. The third move forced his hand. A building condemned overnight. Families displaced by paperwork no one could appeal. Children sleeping on couches. Elders staring at boarded windows. That crossed the line, not strategically, personally. Bumpy stood at the edge of the block that night, watching men he'd known for decades carry what little they had left. That kind of theft doesn't get undone by patience. He called a meeting, not of soldiers, of thinkers, accountants, lawyers, fixers. Quiet men who solved problems without headlines. "This is economic war," Bumpy said, "and it ends the same way all wars do." Nobody asked how, they already knew. The response didn't hit the streets, it hit the books. Shell companies collapsed, credit dried up. Insurance policies triggered audits they couldn't survive. The group panicked, they moved too fast, that exposed faces. One name surfaced again and again, not a leader, a coordinator. The man who made sure pressure landed where it hurt. Bumpy didn't rush him, he watched him for weeks. That's how you learn what a man fears. The coordinator finally slipped. He met someone he shouldn't have trusted. That meeting was recorded, clean, legal, damning. Bumpy held it in his hand for a long time before deciding what it was worth. Because ending a threat isn't enough. You have to end the idea that it was possible.